The idea, luxury executives explained, was to democratize luxury.
So, I want to sit down and talk to you today about some things that I wish people had told me before I moved to Canada. I've been living in Toronto for 11 years now. I came here not knowing anything about Canada or Toronto specifically. I learned French for 2 months before moving here. That was how little I knew. Anyways, I recently went back to China for a while and then I made a video comparing my life between China and Canada, but that video was mostly about my personal experience. Today, I want to focus more on the practical things that you might want to know if you are considering moving and living in Canada. And also, I would like to thank RBC for sponsoring today's video, but more on that later. People do not speak French outside of Quebec, so you don't need to learn French if you're not moving to Quebec. I didn't know because I was a dum-dum, mais je parle un peu français maintenant, donc c'est pas mal. I don't even know if I said it correctly, but whatever. That's actually the same attitude you should have when you speak English. When English is not your first language, there's no reason to be ashamed of not speaking it fluently or having an accent or whatever. As long as people can understand you, you're good to go. Half of the population here in Toronto are from outside of Canada, and most of the native speakers don't care if your English is not perfect, so neither should you. And as you actually open your mouth and talk to people, you will get better. For example, when I first came here, my English was definitely not as good. I could read and write pretty well, but every time I tried to talk to someone, I had to translate the sentence in my head and then say it. Like, can I have milk tea without milk? Sorry, without ice? But as I kept talking to people and kept practicing, my English got better. Now I make videos in English, which you could watch if you would like to practice English. If someone had told me how cold winter could get here in Toronto, I probably wouldn't have moved. Actually, I think I still would, because I'm known to do the exact opposite of what people tell me to do. But anyways, winter gets really cold here, and I haven't stopped complaining about it since I got here. The average temperature here in winter ranges from below 0 to below 20 degrees, sometimes even below 30 degrees. I remember there was this one year, it was so cold that I thought to myself, if it continues being this cold next year, I would just quit school and move back to China. Turned out it was the coldest year in 50 years. If you don't like the cold, Vancouver could be a good option. They have really mild winters there. My best friend actually lives in Vancouver now and he's like, oh, I don't mind the cold in Toronto. And I'm like, shut up. Usually, people either move here to study or to work. I came here for university, so I arrived on a study visa. If you get admitted into a Canadian university, moving here should be pretty straightforward. You could get visa information from the school or work with the visa agency. When I first landed in Canada, I was immediately taken to a little room for an interview because they needed to decide if I meet the requirements for a study permit. Yes, there's the study visa, which I got before I came here, and then there's the study permit, which they would issue when I landed in the country. Since I had the 3-month language program before university started, the officer only gave me a study permit for 3 months. I was not having it. I took it to another officer, convinced her that it was an unfair decision. I brought her over to the previous officer and demanded a study permit for 4 years. Yup, I fought with the customs officer the first day I arrived in Canada, and I won. When you arrive in Canada, the first thing you would need to do is to open a bank account. I had just turned 19 when I came here, and I didn't know anything about banking, credit limit, credit history, or anything like that. I remember the credit card limit that was given from a bank was very low because I had no credit history, and that credit card limit was not enough to cover even a fraction of my monthly living expenses. You would be surprised how important a credit card is in Canada. When I went back to China, I didn't need a credit card because I could just use WeChat Pay. But here, a credit card is everything. because you would need a credit history to secure most cell phone plans, a rental agreement, or a loan of any sort, like a car loan or a mortgage. And the way to build a credit history is by using a credit card regularly and paying your credit card bill each month. When you try to rent a place, for example, if you don't have a credit history, it's pretty common for the landlord to ask you for 2 months' rent in advance, which is a lot of money that you'll have to pay up front. And certainly my $1,500 credit limit would not have covered that. The problem is, as a newcomer, you've got no credit history whatsoever, and the credit cards issued for newcomers usually have very low limits, like the one I had, which makes it really difficult to build a credit history. Like, you don't have a credit history, and you need credit to build a credit history. But then you've got little or no access to credit because you don't have a credit history. It's like a trap in a loop. And this is the perfect time to talk about our sponsor today, RBC. And it's perfect timing as I just spoke to my advisor at RBC, and now I get to share all that I learned with you. Newcomers who bank with RBC can now get approved for a credit card with a credit limit that is much higher than what they may expect from Canadian banks. Their goal here is to help newcomers break that endless cycle. RBC is literally like, I see you, I hear you, and I got you, girl. With RBC Newcomer Advantage, newcomers who bank with RBC can get up to a $15,000 credit card limit on their first RBC credit card with no credit history required to help them get settled in sooner. Yeah, $15,000. That is 10 times more compared to the $1,500 credit limit I had. Well, I'm an old comer now, is that even a term? I had to slowly build my credit history, but as a newcomer today, with the help of RBC, you get to build your credit history faster with a much higher credit limit. Next time your parents complain you don't score high in any subject, you can say, well, actually I do. My credit score. Better yet, for a limited time, newcomers who bank with RBC can get up to 6% cashback for 3 months on a new RBC Cashback MasterCard. That's a bonus of 4% cashback on top of what you'd usually get. That's a lot, and it's free money. Living expenses in Canada are pretty high, I'm not gonna lie, and a little cashback goes a long way when all those costs add up. You can put that money into your shopping fund if you wish. Well, I'm not telling you to spend all your money on clothes. Y'all know I advocate against that. It's important to learn how to manage your money, especially if you live abroad on your own. My mom used to make me write down my daily expenses. I did that for 5 years. And then I realized I could find all my expenses in my credit card statement. Aside from watching your expenses, you should also create a budget. What is your income? That could include the allowance from your parents or from your job. And what are your expenses? For example, your rent and utilities. And once you deduct your expenses from your income, you could calculate a budget for your discretionary expenses, like food, shopping, and just exploring Canada. I would recommend saving 10 to 15% each month and putting that into investment. It's gonna help you build your nest egg. And the earlier you start, the more money you'll grow. It's called compound interest, baby. Of course, another important way to manage your money is to manage your credit. Having a high credit limit doesn't mean you can just spend beyond your means. Come up with a regular repayment plan, pay off the full amount each month, or at least pay the minimum amount before the due date. Otherwise, it's gonna hurt your credit score. Like I just mentioned, it's really important to have a good credit score here. And plus, it'll give you more favorable terms if you plan to borrow money from the bank for a car or a home in the future. But yeah, going back to what I've told you before, with the RBC Newcomer Advantage, newcomers who bank with RBC could get up to a $15,000 credit limit on approval with no credit history required. In addition to that, for a limited time, you get up to 6% cashback on a new RBC Cashback MasterCard for 3 months upon approval when you bank with RBC. That's a bonus of 4% on top of what you would usually get. And oh, I forgot to mention, you also enjoy no monthly fee banking for an entire year with an eligible account like the RBC Advantage banking account. That's quite a bit of saving if you ask me. If you are a newcomer to Canada, I highly recommend looking into the RBC Newcomer Advantage. I mean, an up to $15,000 credit limit is pretty high. It's pretty rare to see here, especially if you just got your first credit card with no credit history. To start things off, you can check out the hyperlink here, or you can speak to an advisor at RBC in person or virtually. Once you've got your money settled, now you need to get yourself settled. Since it's kind of difficult to find accommodation from overseas, I know some people would book an Airbnb for a month or two and then look for accommodation while they're here. When I first came here, I was sent straight to the dorm, so I didn't have to look for accommodation then. But then I moved out in my third year of university and had to find an apartment. It was pretty cutthroat. I found a studio apartment at the core of downtown Toronto. A lot of people were interested in it, so I couldn't even book an appointment to do the viewing. I just put down a check and told them I'm taking the place without viewing it. I ended up living there for 5 years before moving into this place. I can't speak for other cities, but if you're looking to rent an apartment in Toronto right now, the average cost is about $2,200. A studio apartment like the one I rented back then would now cost you an average of $1,719. A one-bedroom will cost you about $2,161. A two-bedroom will cost about $2,819, and a three-bedroom will cost about $3,534. If you're looking to buy a home, as of May 2022, the average cost in the Greater Toronto Area right now is about $1.2 million, with condos costing an average of $770,000, semi-detached homes costing around $1.2 million, and detached homes costing around $1.5 million. Like I mentioned earlier, credit is really important if you're planning to get a mortgage, so you better get on its good side. Accommodation is obviously the biggest living expense, but then there are other living expenses. For example, if you need to pay utilities, that's around $50 to $100 a month. Your phone bill would cost around $40 to $100, and the internet would cost around $50 to $100. If you take public transit, a monthly pass is $156. If you take Uber or Drive, that's a whole nother story. If you cook at home, groceries would cost around $300 a month, but if you dine out, again, a whole nother story. I know I go way past that. Aside from that, there are also expenses like clothing, outings, and monthly subscriptions. I don't think I'm someone who spends a lot of money, but when I add everything up, I'm like, Jesus, staying alive is pretty expensive. Unless you're a trust fund kid, you've got to make some dough to afford the high cost of living here. If you are a student, you can work up to 20 hours per week. Universities usually have something called a career center that could help you with resumes and stuff like that. I highly recommend gaining work experience while you're in university because it'll help you a lot when you try to apply for a job after you graduate. Well, I didn't. I've told you this before, I spent all my university years doing this. Not the best thing I could have done, but I was able to spin it and turn my performance experiences into work experiences. Nonetheless, it would have been better if I had actual work experiences. If you're here just for work, the best way to get a job is to know someone who could refer you, but as a newcomer, not everyone has that kind of connection. If that's the case, you could also utilize resources like RBC's Beyond Banking service. You could just pop into an RBC meeting place like the one I just showed you in this video and get more information on that. If you're thinking of applying for permanent residence in the future, you would need to find certain types of work that fit the immigration categories, but that's way beyond the scope of this video. Okay, I've talked a lot. I'm just gonna shut up now. Let's go outside for a walk. Come on.